soon as I get this chocolate chip cookie going. So, what do you guys think? Cookies were okay. How about the lunch? Was the lunch good? I go a lot of places for a good meal, including Southwest Kansas. As you said, you know, I'm from Missouri, right up against the Iowa line, kind of about halfway east to west, about 15 miles from the Iowa line is kind of where our operation is. I do work for NRCS, and I've been all over Missouri, different locations. Had the chance about 18 years ago to get back to North Missouri, back close to home, and so we did that and kind of changed our operation quite a bit. My dad is now 76, I guess, and we kind of got out of the row crop side of it and expanded the cows quite a bit. You know, we run about give or take 250 cows of our own, and then typically pick up 100 contract cows or something for the summer, and so that's kind of between a 76-year-old and myself that works full time, and once in a while some part-time help. That's kind of our operation, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we go through today. But mainly what I want to try to talk about is, as you mentioned, is soil health, and really what I'm going to get back to is just really basic soil function. How do soils work? How does our management impact those? And I'm going to tell you right up front, I am not a Southwest Kansas expert. Okay, so if I say anything today that you just think that's just stupid, then just ignore it and just keep going. But I do believe that a lot of us have been taught a lot of things that really are misunderstandings about soil function and about how the soil works, you know. And so about 10 years ago, I had the opportunity. I'd been at that point 10 years ago, you know, I'd grown up on a farm. I went to school, ag school, and had been working for NRCS for 20 years at that point, and thought, you know, what's somebody going to teach me about the soil, right? A career in soil management, grew up on a farm, understood. I thought everything there was to understand about the soil, but there had been some things that had happened, you know, on our own operation that I had seen at that point. And then some things at work that just made me start questioning some of the things that I'd been taught about infiltration, about tillage, about grazing management, even, you know, and so I kind of started doing a little more research and a little more understanding, and then I got the opportunity. There was NRCS was starting a new training session, and they were. This was one of the very first ones. It was in Indiana. It was called Soil Health and Sustainability, and they wanted somebody from Missouri to go to this session in Indiana and kind of audit it or evaluate it and see if it was something that we wanted to do in Missouri. And I knew the state soil scientist at that time, and had started my career out as a soil scientist, but I was in a field office at that time, and they said, hey, would you be interested? That sounds like that's kind of right up your alley. Because at that point, I'd already been talking about soil management a little bit and some different things. And I said, sure, what is it? You know, and so I went. And at that meeting, they did these demonstrations. And so I want to do them for you guys here today. And no, they're not Kansas soils. They are Missouri soils. But I've done these demonstrations with soils literally all the way, soils from Florida all the way to Canada, and they're very dramatic, and it helped me. Like I said, I spent 20 years in understanding soils, and these totally blew me away and totally changed my thinking and my understanding of what I had been taught about soils. And so I want to do them for you guys today. How many of you have seen these demonstrations before? Okay, so maybe a third, maybe. Okay, so this first one it's called a slake test, and I've got a couple trays here of soil. Like I said, these are North Missouri soils. They're not Kansas soils. So you can kind of see them. What do you see? You see a difference between the two trays?
Sure. There's more vegetation in that one.
Yeah. Okay. So don't look at the vegetation. Just look at the soil.
It's a darker soil.
It's got a little darker color to it. Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a difference
There's a fuse in it here.
Yeah. That's a light bulb out of my. That's a light bulb. It must have fell out of my pocket. That's a light bulb out of my daughter's pickups, the cab. She said, "Dad, my light won't go out when I close the door." I said, "Did you take the light bulb out?" "No." So I did. You guys, none of you guys don't fix the switch, right? You just take the light bulb out. So okay, I better keep that. So this one, you know, when you look at the soil here, it's pretty fine, isn't it? This one's got, you know, it's crumbled up, but it's still got some aggregates to it. Okay? Has anybody heard that term, aggregate? So maybe you call it a clod here instead of an aggregate, right? A pet-on if you're a soil scientist. But the deal with these two trays of soil is they're exactly the same soil type. The only difference is long-term management. Okay? And so, they look a little different, but what's that gonna do over here? So they did these demonstrations, and this is a measure of a kind of a crude measure of aggregate stability. Aggregate stability is a term that I promise you before the end of the day you're going to know exactly what it is, and you're going to be able to describe it and to go home and do some of this. I think everybody needs to do this at home on their own place. So I've got the difference in soils here. The only difference in these two trays is this one. Now I obviously had to crumble it up to get it on this tray. This is from a field that hasn't been tilled in quite a long time. This is a field that still gets tilled every single year. Same exact soil type, okay? The only difference is management is tillage versus no-till, okay? So I'm just gonna find an aggregate here. Maybe I'll break up a big chunk of one here. Okay, so we've got two aggregates, pet-ons, clods. You can call them whatever you want, right? I don't care. Just don't forget to call me for dinner. So the difference, same soil type, difference is management. This is our tilled soil. This is our untilled soil. Okay, so we've got a couple of cylinders here with some big screen wire in them. So I'm just gonna, and these are air dried. You can see they were pretty dry, weren't they? They've been in my truck. These have actually been in my truck, and I dried them out for a while. So they're for the most part pretty much air dried soils. As we set them in the water, we're gonna watch them, and we're gonna see. I think I got a leak. Brand new. I just took it out of the box. It's leaking water. Okay, sorry. You'll figure out after a while that I'm a little ADD, and you know, I chase a lot of rabbits. Same soil types, tilled versus untilled soil. Okay, I'm just going to drop those in there, and you can see the air bubbles coming out. So as the water rushes in to those aggregates, as the water starts soaking in, the air's coming out. See some differences right away, don't we? Okay? Pretty dramatic, isn't it? So remember, this was the tilled soil. This was the tilled soil. This was the untilled soil. And so this is a measure of aggregate stability. Aggregate stability is how stable individual soil particles are in the presence of water. In the presence of water. And again, you know, think about this is not a rain pounding on the surface of the soil, is it? It's not water rushing across the surface of a field. It's simply water soaking into these aggregates, soaking into this soil. And you can see this one. Those individual particles of sand, silt, and clay that make up that soil, that mineral fraction, they're just breaking loose, aren't they? As the water soaks in, those individual particles, there's nothing to stick them to the buddies to the other particles. You know, they're pressed together right here, but there's nothing to make them stick together in the presence of water. And so that's critical to understanding infiltration. And that's the biggest misunderstanding of soil function that I believe we've all been taught wrong, is how does water infiltrate into the soil, okay? So we'll just let those, and this one will sit here for literally for days like that, days, okay? So how does aggregate stability influence? I mean, we can see right off, if we were thinking about this, if this was a crop field from an erosion standpoint, right? If this was a surface of a field, which one of these two fields, the soil in it, which one's going to be more susceptible to erosion? Pretty easy to tell, isn't it? If it dissolves like this, it's going to dissolve and be very susceptible, be lost in solution, okay? But from an infiltration standpoint, so now, we got another demo here. We're going to put some soil in here, just so you guys don't think I'm going to cheat, you know, I'm going to do it right here in front of you, right? We're gonna put some soil in here. Okay. Again, same things. We got tilled and untilled. Now, obviously, this is getting tilled once, right? But it historically hasn't been tilled. Now, how many of you guys were taught growing up you had to till the soil to fluff it up so you could get water to infiltrate? Okay, and the ones that didn't hold up their hand, they're lying, right? I did. I spent my youth. I was on an 1850 Oliver. This is probably not Oliver country, is it? No Oliver guys out here. You got to get up into Iowa to be Oliver people. So I spent my youth on an 1850 Oliver dragging a disc or a field cultivator or a subsoil or a chisel. I kind of missed the plow time. We did a little plowing, but not much. So these jars have got holes in the bottom. We're just going to make it rain. And to understand infiltration, what part of the soil profile does the water infiltrate through? Does the water go through the solid particles of soil? What part of the soil does the water go through if it does infiltrate? The in-between part, the pore space, right? The nothingness in the soil. So one of the most important features of the soil is the nothingness, is not the soil itself. It's not the fertility. It's not any part of the physical part. It's truly the nothingness, the voids in between. That's where the water goes in. So we want those pore spaces to remain intact. We want those pore spaces to be there, to be open, okay? But if we have a soil that does this in the presence of water, and our soil is made up of these aggregates of all these chunks of soil, what's going to happen to those voids when that soil gets wet? It's going to collapse, and the soil is going to move down through those voids, okay? And that's what you're going to see here. So we're going to make it rain. We wish it was this easy, don't we? Get a big picture. I understand. So, we're going to make it rain. And that's a pretty good rain. That's about 1.5 inches of water is what that's going to equal. Okay? So here's our long-term untilled soil. Water's running right through it, isn't it? Okay, I mean it's essentially once tilled. And don't get me wrong, we don't want to till it. But now we look at this one. We got one little place back here where we must have had a crack where it's trying to go down through. But if you pay attention to aggregate stability, because you saw me till this, you saw me dump this soil in here, didn't you? There's no compaction. You know, this was as fluffy was going to get, wasn't it? That's the thing that we have all that we all have misunderstood. There's no doubt that tilling the soil does fluff it up, but tilling the soil also breaks down the aggregate stability, and that's something that's really the term aggregate stability has been around for a long time. You know, soil scientists have talked about it literally for decades. But we thought that it was an inherent characteristic of the soil. We thought it was just, the soil had it or it didn't. What we came to find out was in the 90s, the mid-90s, some ARS researchers, some Ag Research Service people discovered some substances in the soil that are given off by a particular kind of fungi in the soil. And this fungi, among other things, act like a glue in the soil that glues the individual particles of sand, silt, and clay into these little micro aggregates, into larger aggregates, okay? And fungi, if you understand fungi, they can be a very long filamentous organism in the soil. What do you think tillage does to that very long filamentous fragile organism in the soil? It chops it up, it reduces it. Now, does that mean in a tilled soil we don't have any fungi? No, we do. We just don't have very much. And so that's why in a tilled soil we have very, very low aggregate stability. Soils with a low aggregate stability seal over very, very quickly. And then once they seal over, there's no pore space for them to allow water to infiltrate, even though we just tilled it, even though we just fluffed it up. There's no aggregate stability. And so that soil seals. So if this was a crop field, would this water be standing here unless it was perfectly flat? It wouldn't be sitting there like that, would it? Where would that water have gone?
Evaporate.
It would have washed away, wouldn't it? It would have been lost. And so that's the issue that we're facing, is the management that we've been taught would increase water really doesn't. And evaporation is part of it, and we'll get to that in a minute. But the biggest thing is that it doesn't allow water to infiltrate. Any soil that's highly disturbed, any soil that doesn't have this fungal component, has a reduction in infiltration. Okay, and so so as we go through this, we'll keep referring back to this, and we'll keep talking about this. But this right here, understanding aggregate stability and what causes and what limits infiltration, is the basis of everything we're going to talk about today. Okay, we want to hit half of those lights at least. So if you were going to make a list of things, you know, a productive, healthy soil, you know, and probably with the emphasis on productive, what would that list be? Make a list.
Aggregate stability.
Aggregate stability, fast learner, right there. Good job.
Air spaces.
Pore space, very good.
High yield.
You what?
High yield.
You bet. Production. That's why I say productive right there. But now it's not all about production. We do have to understand there's some more things to it. You know, and it could be a whole bunch of things. You know, from from my agency standpoint, you know, right off the bat, we've got to have a stable surface. You know, if we've still got water erosion or wind erosion, all the rest of it, you know, you're never going to achieve maximum productivity, maximum profitability, as long as you got soil leaving. It's just not going to happen, okay? So stable surface, both from wind and water, and we'll talk more about that. Organic carbon, organic matter, you know, has a stable organic matter, or is at the maximum level for a particular location. How many of us think that our soils have as much organic matter in them today as they did when we settled this country? Most of them have lost half to 2/3, some as much as 3/4, okay, of our organic matter. That's a huge amount of water holding capacity. That's a huge amount of nutrients. We'll get into that more. Has this biological component, okay, that decomposes those residues, makes nutrients available, causes, because it's the biology that makes this aggregate stability. We'll talk more about that. Doesn't contain nutrients or pesticides in forms or quantities that are going to cause off-site damage. You know, and that's a huge one. Nitrates, and we'll do a nitrate test here in a little while after we do get some. We'll eventually get some water to run through here. That's really been a big one. I work in Missouri and Iowa for the most part, and a lot of other places, but for the most part, Missouri and Iowa. And nitrates are a huge issue in Iowa. Just a huge issue. How many of you guys heard about the big lawsuit out there in Des Moines? The city of Des Moines has the largest nitrate removal system in the world, and they actually sued the surface water drainage districts in the watershed where they get their water because of high nitrates. Now, it did eventually get thrown out, but when you've got an ag state like Iowa that has people within it suing each other over water quality, you know, we're not that wasn't somebody in California suing somebody, was it? It is Iowa. So that's a huge one. We're going to talk more about that. And is regenerative under its intended land use. You know, if we know that the majority of our land today is degraded over what it was historically, you know, should we be just worried about let's just keep what we've got here, or let's figure out how do we rebuild it? How do we restore that land? How do we restore that organic matter, that water holding capacity? How do we restore the profitability and the productivity? And we didn't used to think we could do that, but now we understand a lot different. So those three things right there. What do you think is the most limiting in your forage or crop production system out here? Sunshine minerals or water? Water, right? Every place I go, it's always water. You know, you guys probably understand that more than other places. But even in Iowa, even in Missouri, that gets a lot more rainfall, people still answer water. People still answer water. So my question is all of our management, do all the things we do from a management standpoint, do they really focus on maximum water efficiency and use? We don't. If we really truly understood, and that's what we're going to talk about today, is water, okay? And if we really truly understood that, we'd never till again. If we really truly understood water management, we would never have short grass in our pasture again. Okay? We're gonna get more to that. So the water cycle. So we've got to understand the water cycle. So now maybe, you know, this was like in fifth grade science. For some of you, fifth grade science was back there ways, right? Maybe farther than for others. But so what's the water cycle? Anybody got a good 2-sentence summary of the water cycle? No? Come on. The water cycle. It rains, right? Or it doesn't. Is that all there is to the water cycle? It rains or it doesn't? Evaporation. Okay, so we got rainfall. If we look at the water cycle here, we've got rainfall, we get some infiltration, we get some runoff, we get some evaporation, or what's the other way that water goes back into the atmosphere besides evaporation? Transpiration. That's moisture going through a plant back to the atmosphere. So we get evaporation and transpiration, goes back into the atmosphere, then we get condensation, right? And we get rainfall, and that's the water cycle. Okay? So, what's the most important part about that? All those things.
Water.
Rainfall. How much rain we get?
Infiltration is the most important.
How much of that water that falls do you capture? You know, that's the biggest thing. And so the most important part of the whole water cycle, and guess what? You influence almost 100% of this part. That's how much water infiltrates or doesn't. That's the interaction between the soil surface and that rainfall right here. Okay? You dictate, your management dictates how much soaks. I mean, if you get 10 inches in an hour, okay, you're probably not going to quite capture all that. Although you can come a lot closer than you realize. Okay? So, the most important part about that is the water cycle. Is it broken? You know, in 12, we were really dry in 12. You guys too, I think, huh? In 12, if you looked at the drought monitor, and it's covering some country right now if you look at the drought monitor, but in 12, if you looked at the Missouri River watershed from Kansas City up, and that's a big watershed, isn't it? That's a big watershed. If you looked at that drought monitor, it showed 2/3 to 3/4 or so of that watershed was in some level of drought on the drought monitor. At the same time, from Kansas City to St. Louis on the Missouri River, the Corps of Engineers had flood warnings. If you have flood warnings and drought conditions in the same watershed at the same time, what does that tell you about the effectiveness of the water cycle? It tells you it's broken, doesn't it? And that's the problem that we have across a huge chunk of this country, is because of a misunderstanding of soil function, we have a broken water cycle. Broken so much, we were talking just at lunch there, broken so much that I think our land use changes are influencing not just infiltration, but actually weather patterns. We can that's a little more advanced session. We can get into that if you want to later. But we have the ability to change this with our management. You know, so here's a picture of two different blocks of soil. Same soil type. Okay, this is a southeastern U.S. soil. You can see how dark this one is. You can see how solid and massive that one looks, right? Lighter colored, lost carbon, 17 years of tillage. Lost 62% of the organic matter. 17 years. That's what's happened to the vast majority of our ag lands here in the U.S. But guess what? It hasn't been in the last 20 years. They lost that organic matter when? 100 years ago, right? And so we've all been dealing with a degraded soil, and we don't even realize it. We just think this is what it is. It is what it is. And so soils have kind of two different lists of properties. They have inherent properties. This is things like the climate, like topography, the type of vegetation. Was it a prairie soil? Was it an eastern U.S. timbered soil? Was it a glacial till soil? Was it an older soil, non-glaciated soils? Those are all things that we probably can't really change, right? Those truly are inherent characteristics of the soil. The problem is that there's a lot of soil properties that are dynamic properties, but we've been taught for decades that they're inherent. Organic matter, soil structure, infiltration rate, bulk density. Bulk density is a measure of the pore space of the soil. Water and nutrient holding capacity. Excuse me. The problem is we've been taught, even as a soil scientist, you can't really change those. You know, we mapped soils, and we did not look, when we were mapping soils, we didn't worry about land use at all. Not at all. All we did was we mapped it based on based on color. And guess what? Even color is influenced, just like those two trays right there. You know? And so a lot of these things, organic matter, structure, bulk density, water nutrient holding capacity, excuse me, those are things that now we understand. Guess what? We can change those pretty fast. Maybe in 2 or 3 years we can have an influence on them. You know, now are you gonna change organic matter, you know, boatloads out here in your environment that's a little more limited on rainfall? No. But guess what? You can change them a lot faster than we've ever been taught. I was taught, the agronomist at university said, don't worry about organic matter because you can't change it. Now we understand, you know, give me 4 or 5 years and I could probably change it, you know, 0.5%. That's pretty substantial compared to what we used to have been taught, okay? And how we do that, we're going to talk about that. So here's another great example of aggregate stability. We got 2 beakers here. This is from Ray Weil in Maryland. 2 beakers of soil. Same soil type. This one has been sod, and then they've tilled it once. This is same soil type that's been tilled for several years. Crumbled up the soil, put it in the beakers. It says low organic matter, high. Really, there's about 1% difference. So not a huge difference in them. The biggest difference is tillage versus untilled. They're going to add water, and so this is a test. This is a test right here. You got to tell me which one, after they pour water in, which one has better aggregate stability, right? Okay? So we're going to pour water in it. I didn't say it was a hard test. Even somebody from KU can figure this one out, right? Where's the door? I didn't say K-State, right? K-State's smarter than KU, maybe. I don't know. But if you look at it, just like our demonstration right here, right? Pretty dramatic, isn't it? Pretty dramatic. So imagine that this one was a crop field. They tilled it, they fluffed it up, it rained on it. The soils collapsed, just like they did right here. The soils collapsed. And it dries out, and it rains again. How much pore space is left for the water to infiltrate? How much water is going to infiltrate this field? None. You know? Same thing, if we look at this one. Look how slick and smooth and hard that surface is. That's the definition of crusting. Crusting, soil crusting, is soil that doesn't have aggregate stability. That surface dissolves and seals over. With no voids in it, it seals over when the sun comes out and beats on it. And it seals over, preventing future infiltration. But what have we been taught? How do you get rid of crusting? Oh yeah, you got to bring another piece of equipment out and till it again, right? And what does that do to aggregate stability? Makes it worse. So then we till it again. Okay? So these to me, when I saw these, they were just these in these demos. It was just huge. We need soils that have water stable aggregates. So how does erosion start? Whether you're talking about water erosion or wind erosion. How does it start? That's it.
Bare soil.
Does it start with bare soil? So this is bare soil. If I go out and set this right here out on the sidewalk and the wind starts blowing, is this big chunk of soil going to blow away? No.
starts when the particles come apart.
It starts when individual particles of soil, of sand, silt, and clay, break loose from its buddies in this aggregate and get either suspended in water and carried off the field, or suspended in the wind and get blown away. Soil erosion starts with an individual particle of sand, silt, or clay. If we can get those sand, silt, and clay particles to stick together, to stick to one another with those glues that we talked about, if we can get them to stick together, which one's going to be more susceptible to erosion? A big chunk like this, or a little bitty piece of sand, silt, or clay? Erosion starts not with water or wind. Erosion starts when we lose aggregate stability in the soil. Okay? Doesn't matter. It can rain all you want. It can blow all you want. If the soils are stuck together, they're not going to be very susceptible to erosion. Okay? So there's two things that create aggregate stability. There's two things that build aggregate stability. One are these biotic glues that I talked about from soil organisms. And it's not just fungi. There's a variety of other organisms that do excuse me, that do it. Earthworms, for example. And earthworms are one that I always use as an example because they're, fungi is kind of hard to see, right? Earthworms are kind of easy, and so in our part of the world we got earthworms, and they burrow and make holes like this in the soil. Why is that hole still there even though there's not an earthworm there? So have you ever seen an earthworm? Maybe it's too dry, you guys don't have worms out here. Got some earthworms? Yeah. We used to anyway, huh? So after a rainfall event, have you ever seen a trail on the sidewalk or the road where an earthworm went across the... And so he left a trail, but it was kind of shiny, wasn't it? That trail was kind of shiny. So that earthworm has secretions on the outside of his body, and it does a variety of things. It protects him from some disease and some other things. But kind of a secondary benefit to that is, as he makes a burrow, as this earthworm makes this burrow up and down through the soil, these secretions cement those soil particles in place so that as he moves up and down that burrow, he doesn't have to expend energy to make that hole again, right? That's why he's doing it. But it starts, it's one of the things that start the aggregation process in the soil. It starts sticking those individual particles of sand, silt, and clay together. Now, it's by no means the biggest at all, really, and it's probably so small as far as how much it does. It's not hugely effective as far as total aggregate stability, but it's an easy one to see. The biggest one is fungi. Fungi gives off this secretion into the soil. This is a fungi. This fluoresced here. You can see the little sticky substances on it. It is what begins to stick individual pieces of sand, silt, and clay into a micro aggregate, and then into a bigger aggregate. Okay, and this is an ongoing process. It's an ongoing process. There are other organisms in the soil. Bacteria, for example. There's two big groups. I mean, there's a lot of organisms. There's bacteria and fungi, nematodes and protozoa, and the list goes on and on, right? But the two big groups, if we lump it into the two biggest groups, bacteria and fungi. Fungi, just to keep it simple, I always lump the fungi into the glue makers group. They make the glue. The bacteria eat the glues. They use these glues, these secretions given off by fungi and other organisms. There's a particular kind of bacteria that uses them as a food source. And so this formation of these aggregates and the breakdown of these aggregates is ongoing, right? It's a balancing act between the bacteria and the fungi. You got more fungi, there's a little more aggregation occurs. If you get more bacteria, there's a little less aggregation that occurs because they start eating those glues. So we've got fungi. Fungi is this very long, filamentous, fragile organism that anything we do, any tillage we do, chops them up and reduces them. Okay? And then they're slow to grow back. Bacteria, on the other hand, bacteria are this single-celled organism that can multiply exponentially. So you come in, you got a balanced field. You got this field that's got some bacteria and some fungi in it. And you come in and you till it and you chop up all the fungi. You know, what's going to repopulate first back into that environment? Bacteria. And the bacteria do what to the glues? They eat the glues. So while there's no doubt that the physical, that tillage is a physical loosening and fluffing up of the soil in the short term, because it reduces the fungi, accelerates the bacteria, it throws that balancing act of building and degrading that aggregate stability out of whack. And so now we have soils that are tilled that have no aggregate stability. They dissolve in the presence of water. Okay? As they collapse, that makes them susceptible to water erosion, to wind erosion, to reducing infiltration. Even though we can see that tilling them fluffs them up, it's what the tillage does to the biology in the soil, and we didn't understand that part. You know, I mentioned earlier there was some scientists that discovered these glues. They didn't really discover these biotic glues in the soil until 1996, 97. You know, so just 20 years ago, and then it really took another 10 years for the scientists, for the research world, for that information to kind of make it out here to us. And even NRCS, you know, we didn't really start teaching that until about 10 years ago when that first class that I went to. And now here we are another 10 years later before we're getting it out to you guys. Okay? So it's relatively new, a new understanding of this biology. We've known forever, oh, the soil's alive, right? We were all taught that. Soil's alive, you know, soil's alive, but we didn't know what that meant. We didn't understand what our management was doing to that biology, how it was influencing aggregate stability. Okay? So, biotic glues are the first thing that builds it. The second thing are what we call exudates from plant roots. Plants give off secretions into the soil for a variety of reasons. Have you ever tried to dig up a plant? And the soil sticks to it, doesn't it? The soil sticks to it because plants, all plants, and some do it more than others, but they give off these secretions. Some plants will use as much as 50% of their photosynthetic energy that they derive from sunshine and minerals and water, their plant energy that they grow. They will take 50% of that energy and stick it back out into the soil through the roots, through these root exudates. They exude these secretions into the soil because they know, guess what? That's going to attract biology. And it's so specific. They can be so specific, they can give off a specific exudate that will attract a series of organisms to bring them phosphorus. They can give off a specific secretion that will attract a series of organisms that will bring them nitrogen. That will bring them potassium. That will bring them whatever it is they need. So they understand that it's very much a give and take. That those plants, hey, if I need something, I'm gonna take part of my energy. I'm gonna give a little out, and I'm gonna get a whole lot back. And so they do that. But again, a secondary benefit of that is that guess what? Those secretions that they give out as bait to that biology do what to soil organisms, to soil particles? They stick them together. They're like glue. So guess what? The more plant roots we have, the more exudates we have. The more exudates we have, the more we're going to get aggregate stability. The more aggregate stability we get, the better infiltration we're going to get. The better infiltration we get, the more plant we can grow, right? But it all comes back to aggregate stability. And so do we have a plant root? Do we have a living, growing plant root in our soil all year long? Okay? The number of organisms in that were in this rhizosphere. The rhizosphere is this zone right around this root. Okay? That's where the activity is because that's where the exudates are. Be 2,000 times more organisms in that rhizosphere, in that zone right around that plant root. Okay? So this is what we're talking about. We're talking about a living soil. We're talking about a soil that has a variety of organisms in it that do a variety of different things. But mostly they interact with those plants to produce whatever we want that plant to do. What do you notice about most of those organisms?
They're moving.
They're moving. How are they moving?
They're quick.
That's because they're under a light and it's cooking them.
They're long and cylindrical.
They're what?
They're long and round, cylinder shaped.
How many legs have they got? How are they getting around?
Wiggle.
They're swimming. But that's because the soil ecosystem is considered an aquatic ecosystem. They don't have legs. You know, they're like Lieutenant Dan from Forrest Gump. I ain't got no legs. Right? So if they're swimming, what does that tell you the soil environment has to be for them to move?
Wet.
Wet. But yet, what did we do when we tilled the soil? We dried it out. It all comes back to moisture. Moisture drives not just the plants, moisture drives the biology. The biology drives the nutrients that come to your plants. Most of the time when we see plants that we think are drought stressed, we think they're moisture stressed, don't we? When in reality, they're not moisture stressed, they're nutrient stressed because the biology went dormant and quit bringing them nutrients. The plant had enough moisture, but the biology didn't have enough moisture. These organisms live in these microscopic films of water on these aggregate surfaces. They live, again, in the pore spaces in between. They can't go through something solid, right? They have to live in those voids, in those pore spaces. That's where the water is. And it's a microscopic, it can be a microscopic layer, but there has to be moisture there. But yet, how much of our management are we doing to make sure we maximize water, not only water infiltration, but then eliminate evaporation after we get it there? We're not, okay? So how do we have a production and a regeneration system of soil health to do that? Okay, we teach basically 5 things. Less disturbance, diversity, feed our soil livestock all year long, keep the soil covered, and then add livestock back into our crop system. So we're going to go through these real quick and try to help you understand. And again, some of my examples in here are corn bean examples, which you're probably not going to have. So you're going to have to adapt these principles. These are soil health principles that we teach all over the country, all over the world, literally. And so you're going to have to figure out how to adapt them to your system, to your environment, to your crops. Okay? So disturbance. What we know about disturbance is that it stimulates the first responders. It stimulates plant succession. We're going to talk more about that here in a little bit too. We also know that tillage physically destroys the pores. Tillage comes in and breaks down and begins to chop and size soil. As it fluffs it, but as it fluffs it, we break big aggregates into small aggregates. And do you have bigger pore space between big aggregates or bigger pore space between small aggregates? The bigger the aggregates, the bigger the pore space. The bigger the pore space, the more water infiltration you get. So we know that tillage, just the physical, forget the interaction with biology, just the physical interaction of tillage breaks down those aggregates. It diminishes the soil's ability to respire. You know, it is a living ecosystem. Those organisms in the soil, just like me and you, require air to breathe. Right? If we closed that door up and sealed this building up, we'd be here for a while, but eventually we wouldn't, right? When you've got soil that seals over like this and crusts because there's no aggregate stability, what do you think that's going to do to the air exchange of the soil? It's going to reduce it. If water can't get in, guess what? Air can't get in either. As we reduce that air exchange, we're going to reduce the amount of biologic activity. The life that can survive in the soil is going to be reduced. As we reduce the life in the soil, we reduce the aggregation. We reduce the nutrients that are coming to those plants. Okay? It disrupts the habitat of a lot of different organisms. The biggest one here at the bottom is it simplifies that soil community. Fungi, of all of the organisms, fungi cannot tolerate disturbance. They're the most fragile. But the deal is, mycorrhizal fungi are the predominant way that plants take up these micronutrients. Okay? We have a picture of that here in a minute. So what's the history of tillage? How come I was taught growing up, I had to till the soil, I had to fluff it up to get water to infiltrate? Why was I taught that? You think my parents, my grandparents, my great-grand, you think they were ignorant? Come on. How about yours?
Get rid of the weeds.
Okay?
You didn't have
But
weeds,
they-
they killed it.
But they were taught a way to do it that they didn't even know it was wrong.
Right, but so and that's my point. Okay, is most of our ancestors, you know, they didn't have a lot of the amenities and the luxuries and the things that we do, and so if they did something, it was because it worked, right? So why did it work for them, but now we understand it's not? What?
Soil organic matter.
Okay.
Add more carbon back then.
And they did a lot of things. So what's the history of tillage? Who was the first person to till something?
What part of the Bible you want to go to and study history?
I'll go there. It won't bother me.
The Egyptians did it. Ancestors did it. Native Americans did it.
Yep. Okay. And so my question is, it's really not necessarily who did it, but what was the soil like where they were at when they were doing that? Okay. They for some reason they found a plant. They wanted to eat more of the leaves or the seeds or smoke it or who knows, right? But they wanted this plant. And so everything at that point would have been perennial vegetation everywhere, right? So they came in, they had a stick or a horn or something, and they said, man, I want to plant this. I got to kill the perennial vegetation that's here. So they come in, you know, they didn't have glyphosate, right? They come in with this stick or this whatever, and they kill the perennial vegetation. They fluff up, rip up the soil. What was that soil like? It was high organic matter. It was really good soil. High organic matter, high biologic activity, great aggregate stability, right? Great aggregate stability. They ripped it up. What did that do? What did? Because just like my example right here, this was once tilled, right? And look at it. Man, it just got rained on 2 inches. and it's still crumbly, isn't it? It's not sticky. That's what they were dealing with. They were fluffing up and tilling soil that had never been tilled before. Now, 3 or 4 or 5 years down the road, what would it have been like? Would it have still been like this? It'd have been changing, wouldn't it? So 3 or 4 or 5 years down the road, they started to degrade. They have burned up. They added oxygen. They burned carbon out of the soil. They reduced water infiltration. They said, "Crap! We're not getting anything out of here anymore." What'd they do? Moved over here, didn't they? What'd they do to that strip? Abandon it. Would it have stayed bare? No. It had grown back up in weeds. It would have grown back up eventually back to the perennial vegetation around it. So, this soil that they moved over to, high organic matter, high biologic activity, high aggregate stability, right? So fast forward from somewhere in the Middle East to the U.S., okay? When our ancestors came here to the U.S., came to the prairie, did they say, "Whew, look at that prairie, I'm going to plow that for the next 100 years"? Well, not really though. At the beginning, what did they do? They settled an area. They tilled a field. After a while, because they didn't have commercial fertilizer, they didn't have weed control, right? Sprays or anything. So they tilled a field, part of their farm or their ranch or whatever, their 160 or their 80 or their 40 or something. But they didn't do all of it, did they? They farmed part of it, and then as it got degraded, what'd they do? Moved over here. That went back to grass. Either they seeded it or it went back on its own, right? And so then they rotated. And so for a long time, even clear up until the 50s, a lot of our land was tilled and then let it go back. It was in a long-term rotation, right? Then along come in the 50s, what came along after World War II? Commercial fertilizer, which was a product of German warfare. Oh, hey, we can add fertility, we can add nitrogen, we can add potassium and phosphorus back. And we forgot that part of that healing process that our ancestors knew was not just adding N, P, and K, but it was adding organic matter, carbon. It was adding aggregate stability. It was adding biology back when it went back to that perennial. And so we just thought, hey, soil's soil. Our management doesn't dictate it. As long as we add nutrients back, we're good. We missed that whole part of the healing process of aggregate stability and organic matter. Okay? And so the premise that we have all been taught that tillage fluffs up the soil and increases infiltration is true if you're tilling and fluffing up a high organic matter, high aggregate stability, biologically active soil. If you're tilling a soil that's been tilled for 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 years, you don't get the same effect. And that's the fallacy about tillage that we have all been taught. Okay? Was because tilling a good healthy soil does in the short term increase it. But in the long term, it degrades it. And so that's the misunderstanding about tillage. And so we have to understand that if we want a healthy soil, it has to start, even if we're in a cropping situation, it has to start with no-till. You're never going to achieve a healthy soil with a continual disturbance, okay? And so it has to start with some type of a no-till situation. You know, there are other disturbances. We know that a chemical disturbance or even fertility, we know that if you add too much hog manure, too much of a manure, that, for example, it will reduce the biologic activity. Now, it doesn't kill it, but here's what happens. Because you put an excess amount of luxury amount of phosphorus in the soil, for example, the plants say, oh, I've got all this phosphorus, so I don't need to, what did I say a while ago? The plant gives off back into the soil to attract organisms to bring it nutrients? Exudates. So if a plant has a whole bunch of phosphorus right there that it can get, with just root interception, then guess what? I don't need to give off these exudates. But what did I say? What did I say right here? Mycorrhizal fungi are the primary way for zinc, copper, and iron uptake. If we have a soil that doesn't have good mycorrhizal fungi connections, we got these luxury amounts of phosphorus, we can get enough phosphorus into the plant. But because the plant says, oh, I don't need phosphorus, I'm not going to give off an exudate, then it limits the other things like iron and zinc. It limits those micronutrients. We start getting micronutrient deficiencies because we don't have this biological connection. Okay? So we have to understand that even manure, even an organic manure source, can be considered a disturbance. Okay? Not necessarily killing it, but limiting the growth of certain biological components. What about grazing? You think that's a disturbance?
If it's overdone.
If it's overdone, grazing is no doubt a disturbance. Okay? It sets succession back. We know that from a biological standpoint, you have these bacterial systems from these real disturbed soils. Okay? Continuous grazing is a very long disturbance. Now we know to take a profit from grasslands, what do you have to do to it? You got to graze it, right? You got to have an animal out there and take part of it. But if we have this very, very long disturbance event, that's going to be bad for the soil. It's going to bear that soil. It's going to remove that canopy. And we remove that canopy, we add heat to that soil. As we add heat to it, we begin to reduce that biological component. And we'll get there in a minute, some more. So we need to use a grazing system that has a management level to it that limits the grazing events during the year. It still allows us to pull those grazing days, because that's how we make our profit, right? Is animal days per acre, to pull a certain amount of grazing off of that. But we want to do it in a manner that limits the disturbance to that soil. And that's why a very good grazing management system, a good grazing management style that grazes it and rests it and grazes it and rests it is less of a disturbance to that soil ecosystem. But I don't till it. I don't. I got a pretty good grazing event, a pretty good grazing system on there. I don't do any tillage. I don't do any disturbance, you say. What about, you think hay is a disturbance event? I think from what I've seen in most environments, I think haying is about this close to tillage in how much disturbance it does to the soil. Okay, to the biology. Not necessarily the physical chopping and sizing of the soil, but to the biology. Excuse me. So think about this from a biological standpoint. You got a canopy of grass out there. Got this canopy of grass. Man, the soil is pretty cool, isn't it? Got this big tall canopy of grass. Got the soil under there. It's nice and cool. Biologic activity, they're pretty close to the surface. The earthworms, they're all pretty close to the surface doing their thing, making nutrients available. They're making aggregates, they're doing their thing. We come in with a hay machine. We chop that hay, we chop that cover off. Okay? We took the whole canopy, didn't we? And these particular disc mowers, you guys probably still use sycamores out here, disc mowers. These things can take it down to nothing. Okay? So they exposed most of that soil to the sun. They removed the food source. As those plants would have been breaking down, either through grazing, through manure, or just decay of those plants, that would be a food source. So now we remove their food source, we ripped the top off of their house and we baked them. How much of a disturbance event is that to those organisms? Right? It's a huge disturbance event because it's quick, it's fast. Even if we grazed most of that material from a grazing standpoint, what did those cows add back? They added the nutrients back. They actually added quite a bit of water back out in the form of urine. Hay doesn't do that, right? Hay is what we have seen when we go do biological sampling and infiltration testing and different things in hay fields. We see almost the same level of damage to biology as we do tilled fields. We really do. We see a reduction of bulk density. Because again, you think about it, we had our two groups a while ago, right? Bacteria and fungi. So you come in, you take that canopy off. We heat that soil up 2, 3, 4 inches deep. We either make them all die or we make them go dormant when we do that. And you had fungi and bacteria. Even though we didn't chop them, we made them go dormant or we killed them. Remember, they don't have legs, they can't move. So what's going to repopulate first in that zone that we just killed off? Bacteria or fungi? Bacteria. And what do the bacteria do? Make the glue or eat the glue? The bacteria eat the glue. So if we set that top 3 or 4 inches back and we make it very bacterial, what did we just do? Even though we didn't chop and size it, what did we just do to that top 3 or 4 inches of that hay field? We made it very low aggregate stability because we made it very bacterial. We didn't chop and size it with tillage, but we made it bacterial. And we see that when we do samples, biological sampling, when we do aggregate stability or bulk density tests in hay fields. Hay fields will always be very dense and very heavy because there's no pore space, because there's no biologic activity, or it's reduced anyway. So haying is something that, particularly in livestock operations, we've really got to get that hay out of those systems. And I'm not saying that we don't need a little bit of hay, okay? But like right now, you know, are all the cows in this part of the world getting fed, or are they all out grazing?
Depends. Some of both.
Okay?
Mostly hay.
But yet, how deep is the snow? Not so much, right? That I think haying has to be something that really gets addressed. You know, and we feed a little bit of hay, but we don't make any of our own hay. We purchase about a bale per cow per winter. And for where we're at, you know, that's pretty good. And that's, for the most part, that's my fertility program. You know, I can buy hay for really close to the value of the nutrients in a bale right now. It's a little, the value of the nutrients is a little less than what I have to pay for it. But there's no way I can afford to own hay equipment, even for 250 cows. But yet I know boatloads of operations that you know, people have 200 or 300 cows and they bale 1,200 bales. Okay? Technology is awesome, and I love using technology and equipment if I need to. But the problem is, Mr. Vermeer, when he invented the big baler, he made really piss poor managers out of a lot of people. He really did. Okay? And that's a whole nother talk that I do. We're not going to cover that today, but I do have a few pretty strong beliefs about some of those things. Is that okay? So diversity, we got to get to rolling so we can get done. Diversity, what does diversity mean? Okay? You know, we've got basically 4 plant types. Cool season grass, warm season grass, cool season broadleaf, warm season broadleaf. You've got some shrubs and some woodies too. Most woody plants all fall into this cool season broadleaf. They're all C3, 3 carbon molecule plants for the most part, broadleaves. So what does that mean? You know, so, and again, this is where I'm going to use a corn soybean example, and again, yours is going to be different out here. In my world, this is diversity from most cropland situations. Corn and soybeans. We got a warm season grass, and we got a warm season broadleaf. For the most, and it's soybeans. It likes heat, but technically it is a C3 plant. All broadleaf plants are C3 plants. But a warm season grass and a warm season broadleaf. Okay. So what about cool season grass, cool season broadleaf? You know, this is where in my part of the world, some of them are adding, for example, oats and radishes. Cool season grass, cool season broadleaf. So we add those in between our two cash crops as a way to add this plant diversity. And here's why. Different plants give off different exudates into the soil. The more exudates we give off into the soil, the more types of biology, the more diversity in that biology we can get. Okay? So are there any natural ecosystems that you can think of in the world that are monocultures? None. Prairies, forests, you know, aquatic, terrestrial, doesn't matter. Under the sea, on the land, there are no natural ecosystems anywhere in the world that are monocultures. They were all diverse plants. And so we need that diversity for a bunch of reasons. But just as an example, back in the day when I started working with NRCS, when I was growing up, a real common rotation in my part of the world was corn, beans, wheat, and clover. Corn, beans, wheat, and clover. Warm season grass, warm season broadleaf, cool season grass, cool season broadleaf. We had two plants that fixed nitrogen. We had two grasses that used it. We had two plants that had a living root in the soil all winter long. So do you think all those old timers that had this rotation, yeah, I've got this rotation for soil health. You think they did that? Why did they use that rotation?
Made money.
Because it made money, and unknowingly, it followed a big chunk of the principles that we teach. Okay? They were doing it because it worked, because it made them money. And because it made them money because it followed these soil health principles that we're trying to get back to, right? They did it because it followed those principles. And so why do they do that? You know, this is a picture of a bunch of prairie plants. You guys have probably seen this before. You know, different plants have different root structures. Different plants have different purposes. They do different things in the soil. But yet, we try to limit it, and we try to just say, we want this one plant to do everything. And there is no plant that does everything. They all have a different purpose. You know, maybe it's this compass plant right here. Maybe my cows never eat this plant. Maybe in a cropping system, you don't have any kind of deep taprooted plants. But guess what? Look how deep that is. Its purpose may not be to provide forage for an animal. Its purpose may not be to provide a grain to sell at town. Its purpose may be to cycle nutrients from deep in that soil profile and bring them back to the surface. Those nutrients that we leach, that move down through that soil profile. You know, its purpose in a prairie was to bring nutrients back up to this plant that my cows can eat. Its purpose is to bring nutrients back up to a grain crop that you can harvest and sell. Okay? And so we know that because this is some information I pulled off of a typical pet on an NRCS location for an Armstrong soil. It's the third most common soil in the state of Missouri. And so if you look at this is by horizon in inches. And you can see we've got pretty high values, just for example, calcium here at the surface. And then it drops down, but then it picks back up again. I happen to know this one actually came from a grazing system that's managed in a pretty quick rotation. It's not really allowed to get big, but it's not grazed, nubbed off. It's kind of managed, you know, in that mid-range all the time, cool season grasses. And so what are we taught about plant roots, forage roots? The bigger the plant, the bigger the roots. So here, we've got plants that are kind of managed like this. If those nutrients, if things that move down through that soil profile, if they get below these plant roots, they're lost, aren't they? If I don't have something in that system that can get down here and pull those nutrients back up, again, it doesn't matter if you're talking a cropping or a pasture system. You know, that's a whole part of the cover crops, is not necessarily to provide you a cash crop or even a crop that you can graze with your livestock. A big part of what they do is to pull nutrients back up and hold on to those nutrients, cycle those nutrients back to that surface. And so that you can keep them from being lost, keep them from leaching. And we have to have diversity in that system to do that. If we don't have this mixture of plants, you know, we're not going to do that. As an example, this is Kentucky bluegrass. If you're into forages, right? So we need that plant diversity big for a big reason of the root diversity. What it does to the soil, what it does from a nutrient cycling standpoint. So feed our soil livestock all year long. Do you guys eat all year long? Do you feed your cows all year long? Number one food source. The soil's alive. I'll get there in a second. The soil's alive. We know that it's a big complex system. We know that there's thousands of pounds of organisms in the soil. You know, bacteria and fungi, while there's a lot more bacteria as far as numbers, in a good healthy soil, we want, from a pounds standpoint, we want a pretty even ratio between bacteria and fungi. Again, because from an aggregate stability standpoint, we know that those aggregates are built and degraded daily. And if we want them to stay healthy, to have a good, well-aggregated soil, we've got to keep that in balance, okay? And then everything else here. The biggest point here is not necessarily the numbers. The biggest point is that we have soil livestock. Do you put thought and effort into feeding your soil livestock? Do you put thought and effort into making sure they have habitat, they have a food source every single day? We do it for our cows, right? You even do it for your row crops. Do you do it for your soil organisms? Do we, number one food source for those soil organisms are the exudates off of a living root. Off of a living root. How much of the year do you have a living root out there? If you're just a wheat summer fallow. Got a whole section. Corn soybean country, my part of the world. You know, you got a living root from about May until September. And then all fall and all spring, we don't have a living root. They die or go dormant. If they're not functioning, guess what? They're also losing nutrients. They're leaching nutrients. We have to have a living root in our soils. There are no systems that don't have living plants. Even our prairies, warm season grasses, even forests. While those deciduous hardwood forests may not have leaves on them, those plants are still respiring. They are still oozing exudates into that soil. The prairies are the same way. Those prairie plants that look brown and dead right now, guess what? They are still respiring. They are still oozing and leaking these exudates into the very small amounts this time of year, but they are still doing that because they know, hey, I got to give up a little bit of energy this winter to keep that biology bringing me nutrients next summer. It's very much a win-win relationship. Okay, keep the soil covered. You know, this was just a picture I took a few years ago down in South Missouri. It really wasn't a very hot day. This was in June. 91, 77. You know how far apart those two pictures were? 5 foot. Hayfield and the unhayed area at the edge. Okay, and this is still, if you look at it, this is not a bare-tilled crop field, is it? If I had a picture on here of a bare-tilled crop field, this number could be 130, 140. You know, out here in your part of the world, easily 120s, 130s, 140s. Okay? So why is that important? This old study out of Texas, you know, at 70 degrees, these plants were using 100% of the soil moisture was used for growth, was used to make new plant material. As that temperature goes up, that changes. They use more moisture for cooling and less moisture for growth. Same for you and I. You drink more water in the summer or the winter? Summer. Why? Because you sweat. Water is your body's way of cooling down. It is exactly the same in a plant. Okay? They use more moisture for transpiration than they do growth as soil temperature goes up. We've taken air temperatures in canopies. If you got a big tall sward of pasture and you take an air temperature a foot or 2 foot above the ground, it's going to be much cooler than if that canopy is 3 inches tall, isn't it? We create this little microclimate where because we've got this canopy of forage, guess what? That plant doesn't know it's 95 degrees. It thinks it's 80. Same thing with the organism. You'll notice here, evaporation and transpiration. 2 words, isn't it? How many of you were taught evapotranspiration in school? 1 word. That's the way I was taught. So is evaporation and transpiration the same thing? They're both moisture going into the atmosphere, but they are very, very different, okay? And that's why I've got them separated there. You know, and you guys probably have a pretty good handle on evaporation out here, but in my part of the world where we get a lot of moisture, people don't understand evaporation, particularly if you're irrigated folks out here. They understand evaporation a lot better. So how does evaporation from the soil surface actually work? How does evaporation happen? Nobody knows?
Soil heats up, water leaves.
Soil heats up, okay? So it rains. We got this little thing of water right here, and it did infiltrate water. Okay? It's moist. Sun comes out, beats down on it, causes evaporation. Moisture is lost from the surface into the atmosphere, right? It dries the surface out, but it's still wet down below, isn't it? So, sun goes down at night. What happens? Moisture tries to reach a uniform moisture content from one part to another. So if I've got water and I dump water on this table right here, and surface tension is going to keep it in a little circle, right? If I take a paper towel and I don't swipe it, but I lay the paper towel down on it, is the moisture going to stay in that little circle? What's it going to do? It's going to try to reach a uniform moisture content from wetter content to drier content in that paper towel. And if we didn't have any moisture loss into the air around it, we come back tomorrow and eventually it's going to be the same moisture content throughout that paper towel. Okay? Exactly the same thing happens in the soil. You get if we let this sit here for a little while, it's probably pretty uniform moisture content, isn't it? We come and we dry that surface out. Evaporation. Moisture is lost because of the sun beating down on it, because of the wind blowing on it. Moisture is lost from the surface to the atmosphere. You've got a drier soil content and a wetter content. What happens? Moisture is wicked up from wetter to drier, and then the sun comes out the next day. And what happens? Moisture is lost. You know, there's stuff from right here in Kansas that shows that moisture can be pulled from 4 feet down to the surface if you have bare soil. It's all about moisture management. I don't care what environment you're in, it's about moisture management. It's about getting water to infiltrate, and then once you get it to infiltrate, keep the stinking soil covered so you don't lose it. We have never understood that moisture management side of it. We just it rains, that's what we get. we do not understand that every single little decision you make impacts water management, infiltration and evaporation. You know, even in my environment that we get 35 inches of rain, moisture management is the number one thing that we need to manage for. It really is. You know, and what's the other reason to keep it, particularly in a crop field situation? You know, to keep the soil covered. So we need to understand the succession. You were the wildlife guy, huh? Does anybody else, anybody understand what's succession? What's plant succession? The wildlife people talk about it all the time.
The order of plants that come up first, second, third, fourth after this.
Exactly. After you've had a disturbance event, a fire, a flood, a tillage event, and you've got bare soil, is that soil going to stay bare? No. First thing you're going to get some annual weeds, right? Then you're going to get some biennials, and then you're going to get probably some perennial grasses. That can be an issue, but there's several different ways to deal with that. But anyway, we have to understand the succession if we want to understand weed control. It's not about knowing which chemical to spray. It's about understanding those seed germination factors and understanding if we keep the soil covered, we're going to dramatically reduce our weed control. We got guys that are learning that really well in the boot heel, you know, where they've got huge Palmer amaranth issues. We can show you fields to the line. Half the field had a cover crop on it in the fall the year before, half the field didn't. And you know where the Palmer amaranth stops? At the line with the cover crop. Okay? The number one best way to control chemical resistant weeds is with a cover crop. Okay? So, and then we jump back to the pasture side of it real quick. You know, a rainfall simulator. If you get the opportunity to go see a rainfall simulator, do it. These things, I tell you what, are making our job way easier. They really are. This one happens to all be pasture. I threw it in for the pasture folks. You know, we've got a short canopy, pretty solid grass canopy. Short canopy though, a medium canopy and a taller canopy. They rain on it. These trays are perforated. The front jars catch runoff. The back jars catch infiltration. So here's cover, and this is where I'll pick on NRCS. Anybody else from NRCS in here? Okay, good. I didn't want to make it. I'll do it to myself, but we were always taught. We taught for years and years. It's all about ground cover. Ground cover, ground cover. You got 100% ground cover, you're good to go. Doesn't matter how tall it is, it's ground cover. Look at this. That's pretty solid cover, isn't it? But it's pretty short. Look how much infiltration and runoff we got. Okay? It is not just about ground cover. It's about canopy height. It's about aggregate stability. It's about root mass. The more roots you have, we're taught, right? Roots are a reflection of the above ground biomass. What was the two things a while ago that build aggregates? Biotic glues and what? Root exudates. How much roots do we have on this plant? How much root exudates do we have on this plant? If we don't have root exudates, guess what? We don't have aggregate stability. If we don't have aggregate stability, we don't have a maintenance of pore space. If we don't have pore space, we don't get infiltration. Cover is important, but it does not trump aggregate stability. 100% ground cover and crappy aggregate stability still gets you 90% runoff. Okay? Taller canopy, also better aggregate stability. Really tall canopy. Not a huge difference right there. Right? So there is a point where it kind of doesn't matter after that. But it's all tied to aggregate stability. Okay? And then the last one, and this one's probably for you guys in this part of the world, of all the places I've been, Kansas seems to continue to integrate livestock into their cropping systems fairly well. There's some areas that don't, but what we found is that cows actually add biology. You know, there's biology in the manure and the saliva and the milk foam. And ARS actually did some work up in Wisconsin where they took these crop fields, measured the plant available fertility, and then strip grazed the cattle across it, and then measured the plant available fertility behind that. Not from the manure and the urine, but just from the change in the biology in the soil from the grazing. We know that cattle, that plants that are pulled by a grazing animal, by a herbivore, actually stimulates the soil biology. And so what they found up there was that plants that were grazed versus plants that were mechanically cut had more biologic activity under them than those that were mechanically cut. Okay, so we know that cows, there's some kind of a synergistic effect between the biology in the soil and the actual act of herbivory that cows are adding. So what we've found is that it's a really good way to those crop fields that maybe historically have been tilled and not grazed. When we jump into these no-till cover crop systems, that adding livestock with some specific management, so we don't cause some damage in those early years, we can use the livestock as a way to regenerate and restore that biologic activity much quicker than just going with a no-till cover crop system. Okay, and then there's a great opportunity to pull some profit out of it too. This is Jason Saunders over by St. Joe. He was a young guy getting started in 12. This was a picture from the spring of 13 here. He didn't, because of the drought, he did not get a good return on his investment for his nitrogen. He said, man, I had too much money invested. What can I do? So we went in and put a cover crop in it in the fall. He comes back in the following spring and grazes it, strip grazes it with some cattle, and he takes about $100 an acre in grazing days off of that cover crop. No added fertility, just using residual fertility left over from his corn. No added fertility. Okay, took $100 an acre in grazing days off of it, and then lets it grow back up and no-tills his soybeans back into it. That looks like this. So he's got great ground cover, great moisture conservation. Okay, so integrating cattle back into these cropland systems is a great way not only to rev up biology, but it's also a great way to pull some dollars off of it. Got a lot of people that are beginning to, cow guys that are beginning to figure out, man, those cover crops are awesome quality forage. And so a lot of times we've got row crop guys that don't want to own the livestock, developing a partnership with a cow guy or a grazer. And I honestly think that's going to be a huge opportunity in the future for both the cow guys and the row crop guys to develop those partnerships. Okay, so those are the kind of the principles that we teach right there. You know, we've got to try to reduce disturbance as much as possible. We've got to try to add diversity, different kinds of root structures, different kinds of plant. You know, have a plant growing in the spring, a plant growing in the summer, plant growing in the fall. We've got to make sure we've got them a food source. That food source is living root. The exudates off of a living root. Keep that soil covered, keep as much canopy on there as we can, and integrate livestock when we can. So those are kind of the basic principles. You know, the quality of our lives depends on the food we eat, the water we drink, and the air we breathe. All of those things depend on the health and the quality of the soil. Okay? Ton of information out there. These are just some books that have helped me in my understanding of all of it. The Nature and Properties of Soils is a big old thick $200 soils book. But if you want to know something about the soil, that's the one. Holistic Management, you know, is a great book. That's probably one of the early books that made a difference. It's got some great sections, and it's a pretty thick, pretty daunting book, isn't it? But the thing that helped me was there's some sections in there on the water cycle, the mineral cycle, and energy flow and even the diversity, community dynamics, those short chapters on those topics helped me gain my beginning understanding of really where we needed to be going from a soil health standpoint. He doesn't list it as soil health, but that's what he's teaching. Those principles are all about soil health. Okay? And then Agroecology, One Straw Revolution, those are kind of books about working with nature. You know, One Straw Revolution is kind of a book about a crazy Japanese guy growing rice, but it's all about working with nature, not trying to beat nature into oblivion. And that's, for the most part, that's what we've done here in the U.S. is we got to make. We said, man, we got to make this land conform to our will. And then what happens? You know, Mother Nature says, "Whoo!" Right? Doesn't it? That's what happens. So if you want to understand biology better, these two are really good about that. Teaming with Microbes is actually a gardener's book, but it's just a simple, pretty cheap, $10-12, pretty simple book as far as understanding biology. The Teaming with the Soil Biology Primer is actually available on the NRCS website as a download. It's just a little booklet, some real simple about, you know, this is bacteria and what it does, and this is fungi and what it does, and this is protozoa and nematodes and arthropods, and on down the line. Then the last three. How many of you guys like horror movies? Ted, horror movies. If you don't like horror movies, don't read these last three. Okay? The Worst Hard Times by Tim Egan is actually kind of about the Dust Bowl and NRCS, the beginning of SCS, the Soil Erosion Service, which became the Soil Conservation Service, which is now NRCS. But really, it's kind of more about, believe it or not, the government policies that led to the Dust Bowl. Everybody thinks that we changed things, you know, after the Dust Bowl. I would argue it was a dry time. I'm not going to say it wasn't, but I would argue that the Dust Bowl was virtually 100% man-made. If you really study it and understand it, it's really close to where we're at today. It really is, both from a political as well as an environmental standpoint. And that's what these last two get at. Collapse and then Dirt, the Erosion of Civilizations. They both look at, you know, at civilizations around the world and why they collapsed. You know, whether it was Easter Island or whatever, even the Dust Bowl. You know, David Montgomery was at No-Till on the Plains. He was just at No-Till on the Plains in Wichita here. And I've heard him talk 2 or 3 times. He's actually got, if you don't want to read the book, but you want to listen to him, he's got a great hour-long YouTube that's actually a good watch if you want to get it. What he talks about and what he says, and there's other studies, a lot of things that look at it. These studies show that right now, at current levels of land degradation, there is about 2% of ag land globally that is abandoned because it gets degraded so far that it's not productive anymore. Okay? There's none of that in this county, is there? In Iowa and Missouri, that land that becomes so degraded that it's not profitable anymore, you know what they call it? CRP.
We got a lot of it then.
And that's a fact, right? It is. 2% of ag land globally is abandoned. I can show you fields in Missouri and Iowa that they're still farming that will not grow soybeans or foxtail this tall. Because the whole hillside is eroded and gone, but they still farm it. Okay? 2% globally is like that, is abandoned, walked away from, or is still being farmed but not producing anything. If you extrapolate that out, David Montgomery runs through the numbers. There's 3 or 4 other studies globally that show the same thing. We got about 60 or 70 years of soil globally left. You know, and there's, oh yeah, that won't happen, right? You know, there's a reason that China is the biggest purchaser of U.S. land today. There's a reason that China is the biggest purchaser of African land today. Because they see what's coming. They know what's happening. And they're going to go someplace else, and they're going to wear somebody else's land out first. Okay? I got a 15-year-old. My youngest is 15. You know, and 60 years, that's probably not going to matter to me. I'm 53. You think 50 years is going to be a big deal to a 15-year-old? We got a narrow window here. Agriculture has a pretty narrow window here to solve some pretty big issues. Okay? We do. Whether it be erosion, wind erosion, nitrates, you know, I was going to do that one here. Because just like that lawsuit in Iowa, right now if you go do a little research and look at lawsuits against agriculture, from and I, you know, all kinds of reasons, right? Whether it be dicamba or nitrates or whatever. What kind of a deal is that? We won't do the nitrates, I guess. There's thousands of lawsuits against agriculture right now. As that consuming public, and we're not talking about the nut jobs in California, right? We're talking about Midwest people. As things happen, the internet, the consuming public, they are very, very quickly becoming aware of the things that's going on. Agriculture has a pretty narrow window here to do some stuff on our own, or guess what? They're gonna make us, without a doubt. They're gonna make us change. Okay, and I'm as pro-ag as anybody is. But I do know that we got some pretty big issues to tackle. We got the answers. Whether it be you know, good grazing management, or whether it be cover crops and no-till, we can solve. There is not an environmental issue caused by agriculture out there today that we can't solve in 2 or 3 years. Boom, make them go away.
Just by farming at night.
By changing what we do.
Adaptability.
Huh?
Adaptability.
You bet. You bet. I can take a crop field, if somebody will do everything we talk about, I can take a crop field from this to pretty close to this and maintain their profitability 3 or 4 years. I can take nitrates and go from, what this would have showed, and I've done this dozens of times, what this would have showed was the nitrates in the water that ran through the tilled soil is between 50 and 100 parts per million. Safe drinking water level is 10. 50 and 100, and the water that ran through the healthy soil, just as productive as soil, but because it's not biologically leaky, it'll show about 3 parts per million. Okay, I've done that with soils all over Iowa. Doesn't matter if it's had hog manure put on it. Doesn't matter if it's not, if it's had commercial fertilizer. Tilled soils that are very susceptible to erosion, because they're biologically dead, are also nutritionally leaky. They don't have organisms in them to grab onto those nutrients and then release them back to the plant when the plant gives off those exudates. Okay? So we can make all those problems go away like that. Still be just as productive, probably be way more profitable. But I'm here to tell you, those consumers, man, they're smart. I do meetings for groups like this, 100% ag groups. I do meetings in St. Louis for people driving Mercedes. And let me tell you what, there's a lot of them that understand the nutrient cycle and understand erosion and water quality issues better than a lot of ag people. And I will compliment you guys for coming out and learning, okay? But I'm telling you, is everybody from this community in this meeting today? Okay? It's not everybody, okay? And please don't misunderstand it. And I'm not saying that everybody is purposely going out and doing stuff to degrade the environment. They're not. But a lot of it is a misunderstanding of what we have been taught about tillage. A misunderstanding of what we've been taught about nutrient cycling and nutrient holding capacity of soils. They're not doing it. The producers out there are not doing it out of arrogance. They're doing it out of ignorance. And I'm not saying they're stupid. Okay? I didn't understand this. I was an SCS guy. I was a farm boy. I went to ag school, agronomy degree. And until 10 years ago, I was just as stupid as everybody else. I shouldn't say stupid, as ignorant about about soil function. Think about it. I mean, think about cell phones, right? How many of you had a computer in your pocket 10, 15 years ago? You didn't. The technology changed, didn't it? The knowledge level of this technology changed. Guess what? The knowledge level and the technology of soil function and nutrient cycling and erosion has changed too. Do we all know about it? Do we all understand it? Questions? I want to scare you, I didn't want to make you mad. Sir?
You said in your areas you can bring that to 3 or 4 years with our less rainfall. And I understand the whole idea is to capture all that rainfall that we did. Is that an unrealistic goal? Should it take 3 times that if we have a third the rainfall? I'm just trying to figure out a realistic thought on what you said about 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, I think you can change aggregate stability. You're not going to build organic matter as fast as I can. I think you can change aggregate stability almost as fast. If you do it in a drought year, if you make the change in a drought year, it's probably not going to happen as fast. But I've seen way too many examples. I mean, even here in Candy Thomas, is the soil health specialist that's kind of my counterpart out here. We got people all over the country, all environments, different continents. I've been in Canada, I've been in Africa, and the principles, those principles that we teach, that's what's going to get you there. Get disturbance out of it if you can. Get the ground covered, get some diversity, get some different root structures in there. Keep a living root in there all year long, every time. There were speakers yesterday at No Till in the Plains the day before that I work with up in Iowa, and their thing now is what they're calling relay cropping. Before they harvest the cash crop, they're going in and planting the next crop in front of it. Okay? He's planting rye in the fall, and then he comes into the rye, doesn't terminate it, plants soybeans into the rye, lets the rye grow up, harvests the rye off, the soybeans are already planted, the soybeans come up through the rye, and then he harvests the soybeans off. And then sometimes when he's going in and harvesting the rye, this last year, he went in and planted buckwheat between the soybean rows, and so then he harvested the soybeans, and then right behind the soybeans, he harvested the buckwheat. Harvested 3 crops in 1 year. And the first one wasn't harvested yet before he planted the second one. Okay? And it's all that living root. So there's a whole bunch of things that's going on right now. This traditional thing of agriculture, that we've always done it that way, that's going to be the people that really, once they get their mind opened up and say, okay, what have I got to do? Man, oh man, there is so many things you can do. But we've got to get out of this mentality of I'm going to do it that way because that's the way we've always done it. Guess what? Our soils are not the same as they've always been. The weed pressures that we have are not the same as we've always had. We've got to make some changes. You know, Dwayne Beck with Dakota Lakes Research in South Dakota, you know, his statement is, agriculture doesn't need to make incremental changes. We don't need to tweak this and tweak this and tweak this. We need transformational changes. We need big changes. And they need to happen pretty quick. And we can do it. We can. There are literally examples of producers, you know, everywhere. Every county I go to, if I start looking hard enough and long enough, I haven't been to a county yet that doesn't have a producer in that county that has made those transformational changes and won't go back. It's going to take some brain power. You are not going to just wake up and say, oh, I'm going to do this. It's going to take reading. It's going to take studying. It's going to take going to meetings. It's going to take phone calls, talking to people. But you know what? I have yet to find anybody that is not willing to talk about it. You know, just like that meeting yesterday, the No-Till on the Plains. And there's producers from all over the country. And people in the hallways talking. I was talking to guys from Canada. I was talking to guys from Texas that I never knew. People are willing to share because they know we're all in it together. You know, there's not very many industries where your competitors are willing to share their production advantages. But this is one of them. Tons of stuff out there to learn about. You know, start going to some meetings, start talking to some people. You know, give me a call. I send out a monthly email, kind of. Most of the time it's monthly. Sometimes it's not quite, but with information in it. Meetings like No-Till on the Plains. That, I'm telling you, if you've never been to that thing, that is one of the premier soil health type conferences or workshops in the U.S. And I've talked or been to virtually all of them across the country. And I'm telling you, that one is one of the top in the country as far as quality of speakers, diversity of speakers. You know, they may be talking about species and stuff that you're not ever going to plant here, but I guarantee you that what they're talking about is the principles are gonna work.
How long will it take that ground that was farmed out or used up, that's planted to CRP to be productive or healthy?
Most of the time what we find is land that goes into CRP, it depends on what it's planted to. If it's planted to a pretty good diverse native mix, it'll be significantly better when it comes out than when it went in.
In 10 years?
Yeah. If it was planted to a monoculture of cool season grass, brome or fescue or orchard grass in our part of the world, it's going to be just as bad, maybe worse in 10 years. Organic matter doesn't change because there's no pulsing of those, you know, there's no grazing, there's no pulsing of those nutrients.
You don't have to graze yours or burn it or something every 3 or 4 or 5 years?
Well, they got to burn disc or spray it, but that doesn't really do much as far as pulsing the nutrients.
They don't let them graze it?
We can buy it back and graze it. I mean, that's one of the very best things you can do for it.
Because we graze it on every 3rd year you can graze it with paying 25%.
And we can too, and we do that. My dad has a little, and we do that. But for the most part, most acres don't. And so that
a lot of the acres around here, well, I won't say a lot, but
yeah,
probably 30 to 50% maybe.
Yeah.
There's a lot more just with the droughts and the
Well,
fires.
yeah, the droughts and stuff. We had there fire we could graze.
Those that are grazed are going to be better than the ones that aren't. Okay, but I've looked at tons of soil tests after stuff has been in for 10 or 20 years, and in most cases, organic matter, if it was planted to a monoculture cool season grass.
See, we don't have that here very seldom.
Yeah.
It's almost all native grasses and.
Those are going to be significantly better.
They call them native